So typically what we'll do is that we'll onboard a program, and the program will have...
Like, what's the thinking process as the chief product officer to make sure that they feel it's moving, it's progressing, it's seamless for the experience of the company on board?
Building today, we're building with the idea of agentic workflows deeply embedded.
To know your agent, because there's the element of behind the agent, there's a human that has to authorize, and there's a KYC or KYB there. And then there's also the next level, which is...
Now, I think the open question that we don't know the answer to is...
Hi all, Ed here from Persona, and this is personally our Persona podcast. I have to figure out like a better name for this, Robin, but it's kind of like we want to make this more human and then connect with people behind tools and platforms. But I guess this improv is going to go live, so we'll stick with that.
I'll take Persona personally.
There
That
you
works.
go. Love
That
it. It works, right? Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So everyone, I'm here with Robin. He's leading chief product officer at Lithic. And before me, like kind of reading this, which is what I used to do before, I kind of feel like it's your life. You know this better than anyone else. So why not hear from you directly? So do you mind sharing a little bit about who is Robin, what do you do, and what was like Robin before Lithic?
Is there a Robin before Lithic? That's the question.
Okay, that's
I
a
don't
very
know.
important question.
I'm just kidding. No, I appreciate it. No, I've been in the payment space for a while. I would say a big chunk of my time has been in cards. So I was at Adyen in the early days when there were just a handful of us here in San Francisco, probably about 200 of us globally.
Wow. That's a long
But
time.
it was an awesome journey. Like I think that journey is a tough one to replicate, but we're gonna try it now at Lithic. But yeah, I did a whole bunch of stuff, but I think as it relates to what I'm doing at Lithic and in general what we're talking about, I built out our issuing stack at Adyen. And while I was doing that, we looked at a lot of other stacks to see, what would we do differently, what would we do better. And then since then, so I left Adyen at a bizarre time. I left at the start of the pandemic. I went to a travel company, so I went, which is usually not advisable.
Yeah.
But I went to a company called TripActions, which I think most folks know, Navan now. And at that time, we were trying to figure out how we were going to capture additional revenue in it, especially as the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, how do we find that, right? So I built out what used to be called Liquid, but it's basically the travel and expense solution that uses issuing behind it. And it was great. We built a ton of stuff, and again, I got to see another ledger while we were there in terms of like how you could do issuer processing. And so I got to see a few things there. And then just before I started at Lithic, I was at a company called Nium. And again, we were using issuer processors on our side. So I kind of knew what was going on. So then, when I got to Lithic, I was looking at what they were building and where we were kind of like really spiking, and you could just tell that like we had built the technology in the right way. So our founders really come from a tech-centric background, and so as a result, like a lot of the things that we're building now really like allow us to do things that are going to be usable in this like agentic future, whatever like the next stage comes to. And I think a lot of things that we're doing with you guys and just generally the fraud stuff that we're building also lends itself to that. And it's just really hard to do with some of the older solutions. So no, I'm excited. So that's kind of how I got here. This is what I've been doing. But
That's amazing.
But we'll see where this journey goes, man.
Yeah, well, I'm on the same boat. We'll see. I think we're changing so much, and I'd love to hear your take on KYA and all of those. But
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people don't know much about like the fintech space.
Yeah.
I'm hoping there's more listeners that like what we can cope in next fintech. So for those who don't know Lithic that much, and they
Yeah.
understand maybe, okay, card issuer, can you walk me a little bit about like what does that mean for a company that wants to start using Lithic to issue their cards? What's the process? What is the common use case that you guys serve?
Yeah, I mean, so okay, I guess let's start with what are we even talking about card issuing, right? Because if you ask my parents what is card issuing, they're gonna be like, I don't understand. So what is the difference between?
If I say I work in community, my mom's like, "Oh, you're working for a church? That's great." I'm like, "It's not quite that."
Not
but-
exactly, not exactly what we're saying.
Yeah.
So I mean, basically, like we're issuing both the physical and the virtual card. So we're what you call an issuer processor. So we basically will connect into all the card networks like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and then we generate these cards. And then I think what's really unique and what's special, and the story that I tell to my parents when they ask, what does this really mean? We give all of these additional modern pieces of functionality that you don't get off of like probably the card that's in your wallet, right? So like if I think a good example is like, if we think about something that I was doing at Navan, right? Like inherently as a transaction comes in, you want to check it against policy. You want to make sure that it's within policy. Somebody shouldn't be able to spend more than $1,000, or they can't spend more than $50 on a meal. Like, how do you do that, right? So in those situations, the transaction comes to us. We then send it usually to the program. So let's say Navan, right? We send it to Navan, and this is all happening in milliseconds, right? Where the transaction comes, we see the transaction come in. Someone swipes at Starbucks, it comes to us. We send it to Navan. Navan looks at it and says, okay, look, the policy says that they can spend this much. They send us, we're good to go. It looks good. They have enough money. And then we send it back at Starbucks and it approves the transaction. And that all happens behind the scenes, right? But that kind of technology is not something that, probably the Chase Sapphire card that you have, even though it gives me great benefits, probably doesn't have, right? Yeah. So when we talk about modern issuing, it's really about bringing elevated experiences to underlying cardholders with a lot of this stuff. And this is just one example, but there's a ton of other stuff that we do.
Love that. And it makes completely sense. I think to your point, I guess a regular card would be pretty open and no guardrails, and like, is this permissible? Is this something that they should be spending on? But also it creates the high risk of like fraud, because it could be misuse, either for intentional use, or someone just misusing or had like a card stolen, or their credentials stolen online and they kind of want to use a company's card for something they shouldn't be using. So how do you work on like onboarding, for example, a company? I would imagine like a lot of companies want to have like their own issued cards and their own guardrails. What would that look like in making sure they are who they are and the companies are legit, that there's a process there in place? And then how do you establish these guardrails? Is it something that's in between the company and you, like as a configurable platform for them? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, so this is where the integration that we have with Persona really comes in, right? In the sense that inherently we're providing a financial solution for our customers and a financial service. And so as a result, we gotta make sure that we follow the rules, right? So we have to do KYB if it's a business, and then we have to check their UBOs, or their underlying beneficiary owners, to make sure that whoever we're servicing doesn't fall into anything that's going to get us, the overall ecosystem, from a regulatory perspective, into trouble. So this is kind of how we think about onboarding, right? So typically what we'll do is that we'll onboard a program, and the program will have to basically onboard that program with KYB. And then inherently, as they bring on other programs, we will help them also KYB or KYC those. So sorry, again, like KYB, as everyone, especially in the Persona universe, knows, is know your business, and KYC, know your customer. Like, we need to make sure that we get that right. Now, in some instances, some of our customers might come and say, hey, I'm taking care of that. And then we would have to assess, okay, like, do we as a compliance and risk and compliance team feel comfortable with the types of verification methods that they're putting into place, right? And they might be using you guys or somebody else in the back end to do that, and we might get okay with it. But like, that's kind of how we think about it.
Gotcha. So that could make the whole process heavy on friction for someone who's onboarding, let's call it.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that all this feels seamless, not only from the compliance perspective, because I think that's one of the aspects, but you probably have like other guardrails you have to put in place in between the KYB.
Yeah.
But it has to also feel like I'm progressing here. I'm not just like stuck in an old school system, trying to issue my card for my company.
Yeah.
How does what's the thinking process as the chief product officer, like to make sure that they feel it's moving, it's progressing, it's seamless for the experience of a company onboarding?
I think that's why. I think that's like if you. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if you're teeing me up on the persona thing, but like I think that this is kind of we were obviously doing KYB before we moved over to you guys, but I think the reason that it felt like a really good fit is that like inherently, to your point, you kind of you want to have some of these built-in flows where you're like, okay, I can see that I submitted my passport. Okay, it's been verified and it's actually working, right? So like I think these things are places that we also see a lot of value. I think that like, you know, I know you guys are doing a bunch of stuff on agentic. We're also doing, when I talk about agentic, I don't mean the hypey side, but I mean like
The actual
like workflows, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
how can you create workflows and think about the like atomic tasks that need to be done, and can you create a way that you can do some of them in parallel? Can you make the experience better for your underlying customer so that they don't feel like, oh man, I gotta like, because yeah, onboarding like in general is not fun,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And so like, I'm not saying that it's going to become all of a sudden fun, but like you want it to feel like, all right, I gave you X, you're telling me it worked, right? So I think for us, like that's a big piece of what we're thinking about doing, and we're doing more and more of that now.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And I kind of want to touch a little bit on that. I know this was something we're like maybe we're discussing first over the phone, and like how do we think about the future with agentics and
Yeah.
the kind of KYA, right? The know your agent, because there's the element of behind the agent, there's a human that has to authorize, and there's a KYC or KYB there.
Yeah.
And then there's also the next level, which is by default systems block bots. You know, it's like, hey, it's not accepted to have like a known human trying to, I don't know, interact here or try
Yeah.
to get to this access here. So we have to relearn, maybe make tools unlearn some of the previous attributes and behaviors that were meant to be like that, like hey, prevention of fraud.
Yep.
So what are you thinking about? Because I know there is a lot of connection between Persona and Lithic and that of like how do we first think about like the infrastructure, the guardrails, but then the KYC or KYB behind the agent, and then once that's in the market, there's maybe other guardrails that Lithic can put in place as well to like how you think about the workflows and whatnot, right?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, look, it's a little bit early days, right? Because we don't really know how this is all going to play out, right? People talk about, oh, your agent is going to help you book your trip to Tahiti, but like, is that real? I don't know. Like, also, do you care? Do you need an agent to book your trip to Tahiti, right? So, but like, if we think about it from our world, right? Like from a card perspective and a identity perspective, like inherently, every card, regardless of whether you give it to an agent or not, has somebody or some entity that sits in front of it. So inherently, we believe that we're going to have to keep doing that, right? Because like, what is the difference between an agent making a purchase online or you making a purchase online? Because in the end, it looks kind of the same, right? Like, it doesn't, like, realistically, nobody at like Nike.com knows that it's you or an agent, really. So inherently, whoever has that bank account that sits behind the card has to be KYB'd or KYC'd. Now I think the open question that we don't know the answer to is like, to your point of like, hey, shopping experiences online were built for people, not agents on the other side. I do think that browser-based automation like OpenClaw has like kind of turned the whole thing slightly upside down, because with OpenClaw, it all looks the same. So it no longer looks like bot traffic. But I do think that like as we think about what agentic commerce really looks like, there is going to be a place, and the card networks are also thinking about this, right? Like, how do you authenticate the agent so that it makes the merchant who's accepting the transaction feel more comfortable taking that transaction? So I think we'll see more of that play out, but I think it's also like somewhat early. But I guess the last thing that you mentioned is like, what are we doing to like kind of reduce risk? It's like, okay, the beauty of a modern card issuing system, as I was talking about with like Navan or any expense solution, right, is that now we can say, hey, agent, I'm giving you this card. I'm only going to give it to you for one thing. I want you to go buy sneakers at Nike.com, no more than $200. That's pretty restrictive. So it doesn't really matter. Like if your agent hallucinates, if anything crazy happens, like you kind of know
Yeah.
your money, your grand pool of money is not at risk. It's probably just that $200 card that they can only spend at Nike anyway, and they can only spend up to whatever you said that they can spend, which is kind of nice.
Makes sense. And I guess and some people make that knowledge, and I think it makes sense as parents. That is like issuing a card to your kid.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, hey, here's where you can spend, and this is how much you can spend at this location. So you have like guardrails there so that
So
he
that-
won't go crazy.
Very similar.
So there's a little of like, yeah, we're training like young
little kid.
generation. Yeah, little kid to like how to behave. There's something I'm thinking is you mentioned like something that just triggered like a question to me. So my degree, believe it or not, like 25 years ago is in design. So when I was thinking about design, digital design,
Yeah.
back in the days, there was a very early term that was like called responsive design because mobile was just like being discussed, but it was
Yeah.
never like a thing. And I think maybe it's like similar in the sense of like, we're not there yet. But the thing was, I think you alluded to that. We may have to rethink systems a little bit because they're meant for human consumption.
Yep.
And back then it was like they were meant for desktop consumption, and now we're thinking mobile consumption. So that's when responsive design became an even like was initially like just like trendy, or like maybe it's a hype,
Yeah.
and then 10 years later it became an actual thing, and it's not it's the norm now. Everyone's built for mobile first, or even like experiences that would work seamlessly on mobile and then desktop.
Yep.
So I'm thinking like agentic. Do you feel like there will be a point when this is going to become the norm, or like we have to rethink systems and interfaces to be agentic friendly as well? So that
I think yeah. I think a lot of people are already thinking in that way, and I think that like probably the nuance between an agent booking your entire trip to Tahiti is that like most of us are now using OpenAI or whatever to like research stuff, right? And so it may not be that you're saying you just book my whole trip, but you'll get to the point and they'll say, oh, I found this hotel, this is what it looks like. And instead of doing the normal, like, let me type in my card number and my address and all this other stuff, that agent will go and just like finish. It won't be like automated, but it'll be to the point where you go, yeah, that's the one that I want. Can you buy it for me? And it'll go buy it for you. And you're right. So then you do need to think about what does that interaction look like? And I think that's going to change. And like, if you think about how fast this stuff is moving, like, because I mean, now my parents are also like basically checking everything
I have
on
the same bar.
ChatGPT.
Like, my mom's on GPT.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
so you're
that's
like, okay,
critical mass.
it's real. It's real, you know?
happening.
So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too, right? So like, it's going to move so fast that like, I don't know. One of my friends who's at Basis Theory was like, I think in 5 years, like all transactions will happen through some agentic flow, not agentic commerce in like the way that we're somewhat like hypothesizing, but like on some level through some agentic like mode, we will be making purchases.
Makes sense. And kind of going back a little bit, like how you're thinking about Lithic and systems. I know that there's maybe like a specific cohort that's like the most common in terms of company size or roles within a company that would like reach out to you. And I guess the question is, there's one like complexity around that and thinking about how to optimize for them. So it's almost like, okay, this is a common use case. Let's optimize for that use case. And there's an upcoming use case in relation to that where like there's more like solopreneurs that may have like an actual working business, that it's making revenue and all, but they're like maybe too small, or the founder is like, it's him plus a lot of open claws, clawing around.
It could happen.
Right. So how do you think about, optimizing for use cases or optimizing for like, what's the, say like common buyer for you?
Yeah, I mean, so like in general, we're a horizontal platform, right? And it's similar to how Persona thinks about things, which is that like we can essentially serve any customer, but then inherently like we are thinking about like where the key pockets are, and I think it drives from like what we see today, right? So like I would say vast majority of our customers are some sort of digital banking experience, right? So it doesn't have to be a digital bank per se, right? So like we power Mercury, which is true bank. We also power Coinstar, which like is not really a bank at all, but at the same time, what we're powering is a banking experience that they're trying to deliver, right? So it generally it's going to be digital banking or it's going to be disbursements, right? Like how do I use cards as a disbursement mechanism to get money to someone? It might be like an insurance payout, it could be a lottery payout, it could be like one of these kinds of things. So that's kind of how we think about it. But realistically, we're focusing more on building horizontally, and then for these like very specific verticals that we see, we're going, okay, how can we optimize for those specific verticals? I think on your question on like really small to big, it's hard to do both really well at the same time. Like I know from my experience at Adyen, right? Like Adyen, I mean, you can do it in the long run, but like especially in the beginning, Adyen was always really good at enterprise, and Stripe was always really good at like early stage developer.
Yeah.
As much as they tried to move enterprise, and as much as we tried to move down, you realize that they were two vastly different markets that had completely different needs. Now, if we look today, which is a long time after both companies have been around, they're obviously servicing across the spectrum. But I think in the early days, it's helpful to have focus. So I think like for us, it is like more of that mid-sized to enterprise customer that we're going for. And I think like if you think about all the complexities we've been talking about, for the really early stage, it could work, but like in general, it probably makes sense that like you've got into a certain maturity and you're like, okay, now I need this level of functionality.
Yeah.
So
It makes
that's
total
kind of how
sense.
we think about it.
And it's very similar to what you mentioned, like with Persona, because we're super horizontal. There's just like almost any use case.
Yeah.
But then it's like, how much do we want to bet in like certain use cases that are maybe higher risk, or maybe the reward's not just there yet. We're just serving as maybe there's a small need.
Yeah.
But enterprise, it could be like, okay, that's where the larger bulk of the needs are. And,
That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of like as we kind of get to like the wrap up, I want to hear like more like as Robin's thinking about the future, either like with the chief product hat or just like in general from what you observe in the industry, what's kind of keeping you, awake and keeping you like busy, and maybe things that you're thinking about as next steps.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've like kind of like touched on agentic here and there. Mm-hmm. I think that like the benefit that we have is like some of the services that we're building today we're building with the idea of agentic workflows deeply embedded. And so again, like I said, like there's a hypey aspect of agentic, but like in this sense, I'm talking about like, okay, you need to deal with a dispute. How do you do it in an agentic way to make it more seamless for the cardholder, for our programs, that kind of stuff? I'm pretty excited about where we can go with it, because I think it's inherently, even if the incumbents want to do it, it's just really hard to do, because you have to rip apart all these systems that have been in existence for a really long time. So disputes, fraud, cardholder support, like onboarding, identity, like how do we continue adding more of these like workflows that just make the overall experience just so much better? And technically you can offer it at a much lower cost, right? So I think that's like where there's a lot of excitement within the company. I think we're, not to talk about another hypey topic, but like, stable coins obviously are big in the payment space. But I think there's areas where like it's clearly a lot of value, right? Which is that like, if I can do settlement to the network in stablecoin, it means I reduce the overall amount of money that programs have to give me, because I can do it 24/7 in terms of settlement. And then there's also like this whole thing that you're seeing with stable backed cards, where like people in countries all over the world are taking stables as a form of payment. They're paying others, and then they want to spend it in the real world. And it's like, well, how are you going to spend it? And so cards are a big place to do that, right? So like, I think if you there's a ton of stuff that we want to do day to day just to improve quality of life for our customers. But if you think about like the big swings that we're taking, I think if you look at agentic workflows and stablecoin back cards or stablecoin network settlement, those are the places that we're like, if one of these takes off in a real way, it could be pretty big. And I think we're already seeing that there's a lot of like momentum behind them. So yeah.
Love that. And it's, as you mentioned, it's crazy to think there's so much more that can be explored within that. And even like the breakdown of like how the agents will work for specific subsets of like the card issuing. So the disputes as an example, it's a specific use case. There's a whole workflow on there that you could just, I don't know, AI, the whole thing, and automate through or agentic. So that's insane. That's really good.
Yeah, because they're all like known processes, right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing that crazy about it, and usually just kind of actually like, I mean, if we use KYB or KYC as the example, like, before somebody'd have to review the document and see, is it right, is it wrong, let me send it back. Now you can just like quickly be like, okay, hey, you just sent me, you're disputing that you bought these sneakers, great, what should it be, tell me. Okay, now I need this information. Okay, great, I'm going to submit it. And nobody had to even be in the loop, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, love that. That. Well, love the chat, Robin. And actually, there's a really good piece of wrote in that blog that you had shared with us. So I'm going to share that as well. And then if people want to stay in touch, what's the best way to either find you or Lithic if companies are thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy enough. You go to lithic.com, you can sign up for our sandbox, click into our MCP, hook it up, start using the sandbox. For me, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm just Robin at lithic.com. So if you need to reach me, feel free to do that. But otherwise, it's easy enough.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love it. Yeah, love to talk.
Same.
Thanks. All right. If you like, make sure that you share this with people that, may be interested in issuing cards. Who knows? Maybe they want to get started with Lithic. But if you also feel there's someone else who should be a guest for us, let us know. Ping me either on LinkedIn. You can send me a message. You can join us on With Startup, with community. Start with Persona, or you can go into withpersona.com/communities or /startups. These channels will be the same. You're going to end up on the same page eventually. And you can sign up there. You can send me a message. You can also reach me on ed@withpersona.com. And yeah, good to see you all. Stay in touch.